Have you?
Yes. My sister-in-law and I drove over to Canton and took it, and I didn't remember it, and I was digging around through some stuff today, and I found the paperwork.
You
So,
found your workbook.
I
Yeah.
mean, yes.
Well, um, because I rarely follow a script, there'll be new stuff in the class, I'm sure. And then we've just seen a lot of things evolve over the past couple of years too, or past several years. And so I'm looking forward to it. This Of all the things that I do in the garden, it's the herbs, that are my niche. And then it's the medicinal herbs, especially because um, of the impact I've seen it make on my life and my family's life. And it's one of those things where I did the research and I was trusting what I had found, and then people that had shared with me what they were doing, and it worked. But here we are now, so many years later, and I was just thinking about it, the how I became involved with medicinal herbs was long before I became a gardener. And but I didn't know anything about how to grow them, how to get them from the garden to the kitchen to the medicine cabinet. I didn't know how to do that, but I would go to the health food store, and purchase them off the shelf. And the way I was introduced to it is that my daughter Savannah, which is our second child, she is about to turn 30 here in a few weeks. And when she was 3, we had been battling ear infections for pretty much her whole life. And we're at the point where the only other option that the doctor had to give me was tubes. And I wasn't crazy over the idea. I wasn't convinced that they worked well enough to justify, the surgery and that sort of thing. But I went to church with a chiropractor, and she was my friend, and she told me it's Dr. Ingram in Canton, and she told me, she's like, just bring Savannah to the office and let me check her out. Let me have a go at it, and if it doesn't work, you can take her back to the doctor, and get the tubes and all that. And I said, Tina, what can a chiropractor do for an ear infection? I was so ignorant of any of that. And she said, you would be surprised. And boy, was I. Turns out Savannah had um, one of her vertebrae had been wedged up under her skull, which had her tubes pinched. So no matter what had been done, it was never going to drain like it was supposed to. So Tina adjusted her, and then she told me that we would have to help Savannah's immune system get strong again because it had gotten weak from the antibiotics doing the job for her. And so she told me to use garlic, that would be the safest, easiest one to start with Savannah. And so just garlic oil, I would put it in her. I mean, this shows what kids will drink. I would put the garlic oil in her sippy cup and she would drink it. I mean, I can't even imagine that tasted good, but she drank it. And that's what started me on the path. And then I got involved with plants, and then it just grew like a garden does over time. And then I met the Wood County Master Gardeners, became a Wood County Master Gardener in 2011, and the rest is history, as they say. So I am really excited and I'm really passionate. I love to share with people about the herbs because we can live a healthier life um, with really, honestly, not a lot of effort. And we can avoid a lot of things that modern medicine has its place. I'm not here to bash that, but I just feel like we need to be more in control of our health and in control of our medical field than we are right now. So I love to share this with y'all. So now I'm going to share my screen and we'll get into it. There we go. And so, of course, I'm going to say that this is meant to be information for you to use, not to diagnose or treat any of your ailments. It's sad we always have to point that out, but I do. So let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And that was stated by Hippocrates. And this really, I think, I just find it so interesting as to where we sit today and the movement we've seen in our country over the past little while, where people are really starting to talk about this, and it's a lot more mainstream than it once was. When I first started down this path, everyone regarded me as, the hippie or the loon, or I even had one of my kids brought a college friend home and they later asked her if I was a witch because I had all these jars and bottles and stuff sitting around the kitchen with herbs steeping. And they said no, she's just a hippie. And which is maybe a little true. So it's just interesting to see the journey that things have gone on. And so now it's not so odd for us to talk about we'd be healthier if we ate a particular food, if we didn't eat certain foods. And what's great about herbs is that they're not a sacrifice or a hardship to use or to eat. If we sometimes what is good for us doesn't taste very good, but herbs taste really wonderful. They are what makes food taste so good. And what's great is that while you're eating food that tastes good, it will stimulate your body to do what it was created to do, which is actually to heal itself. Um, our bodies, if given time and given the resources, will fight off illness and will heal, cuts heal, broken bones heal, and things like that without actually a lot of intervention. The problem is that our bodies are so overloaded with toxins and junk that it can't move fast enough and the illness can move faster. So we're going to talk about this is the beginner stage of it, the 101. So this is going to be an overview. In the classes that are coming up over the next few weeks, we'll do a lot deeper dive into particular aspects such as mental health, um, herbs for mental health, herbs for immune stimulation, herbs for your gut. That's where I've probably learned the most over the past couple of years. I had no idea how important our guts are to our whole person. And so this one we're going to talk about um, the overview, gardening, how to use them, and then at the end we're going to have time for Q&A, and then y'all can certainly share anything that you would like to share about your journey with herbs. And then if y'all have a question as I'm going through, there should be the ability for y'all to raise your hand. Um, yeah, I don't see it on mine as to how to raise your hand, but if you figure it out, it'll show me that somebody has their little hand raised, and then I'll know that you want to ask a question. So let me know. Okay, so a little bit of a history on herbs and spices. A lot of people frequently hear the question, and I certainly wondered it too. What was the difference between an herb and a spice? And typically, herbs are the whole plant, the leaves, the stems, the roots, even. Whereas spices are the seeds. Cilantro is an herb while it's a green plant, and then it's a spice once it goes to seed, and you harvest the seeds, and that's coriander. So spices tend to be the seed parts, and then the herbs are the whole rest of the plant. And a lot of times we see that spices grow along the equator. They need a very long, warm growing season. So you're going to find those around the equator. Of course, now with greenhouses and such, we could have some specimens in our greenhouses and we could keep them over the winter, but they're not natural to here. Whereas herbs are natural, they're native and indigenous to all temperate regions, on the earth. Some, of course, prefer different regions of that, but you can still find them. Rosemary and lavender, they come from the uh, the Mediterranean where it's arid and dry. And then you have several of the herbs like the cohoshes or ginseng, and they grow in the woods and they don't mind damp and all of that. So it's pretty neat. We have on our property, we have saw palmettos that grow native here. And so they're native to us, but they wouldn't be native to another region of the United States or the world. And so it's really kind of interesting that um you might not have every herb can grow where you are, but you will have enough to take care of your body will grow in your areas. And that's also part of, I guess, would be my focus too, is I'm all about being independent. So if you're going to be independent, you need to be able to grow it yourself. And that might mean that you might not can grow everything. So I might not know everything about every herb, which is impossible to do because one thing I have learned in this past 20 years is that the world of herbs and medicine is deep and huge and wide, and I'm just still getting started, still learning stuff every day. And so the most common parts of the plants that you'll use when you're doing your herbs are the flowering parts, the greenery, and then the roots. And which part you use depends on which herb you're dealing with. As far as the dandelion, you'll use the entire thing. Flowers, greens, roots, all of it. And then you have the word herbaceous, which actually means it's a plant that dies back to the ground and comes back from the root. So sometimes if especially if you're just getting started, it can be a little confusing, all the different words. Um, but that's what herbaceous is. And then herbs, another reason I love them, I love old stuff. And herbs are ancient. They go all the way back. Rosemary is propagated from cuttings generally. Um, and so that rosemary that you have, who knows how far, how many generations, how far it goes back. And we do know rosemary goes has been well known as a herb back into the Roman times. And matter of fact, there's folklore about rosemary that the original Rosemary officinus, like the mother of all rosemary plants, it has blue leaves. Some of our variations that we see today will have white leaves, but that original old-fashioned one has blue blossoms. I said leaves, didn't I? Blue blossoms, blue flowers. And so the story behind that is supposedly that Mary, while she was traveling with Joseph, um, to Egypt to save baby Jesus. While they were traveling, she laid her cloak on the shrub, and her cloak was blue, and that's what turned the flowers blue. Have no idea, obviously, if that's how that went down, but it's a neat story. And then rosemary is known for rosemary for remembrance. The Romans believed that if you wore a wreath of rosemary around your head, it would help you remember. And so, interesting point to that is that you can absorb the essential oils directly from the plant just through your skin. Don't have to do anything fancy, just walking through your garden, rubbing your rosemary shrub, that essential oil gets on your hands and then that goes into your blood system. And so now they have done studies. The E Commission in Germany has done a lot of studies on herbs, and they have found that the chemical compounds in rosemary do actually boost brain activity and protect against Alzheimer's. There's a chemical that as they are able to study the Alzheimer's patients when they pass away, that's missing, that has been depleted. And they have found that the chemical compounds in rosemary actually buffer that chemical and don't let it get depleted. So that's pretty cool. And so now I wonder if those Romans weren't absorbing the rosemary through their skin, the essential oils, and maybe it really did help them remember and do better on their exams. So it's just fascinating to me. And then lavender for love is always used in spells that would sharpen the mind and increase love. And it's also believed that it could ward off the evil eye and be a favorite herb of fairies. I happen to like the look of rosemary, but it's not my favorite scent. Um, Everybody's different. And that's another reason why I love herbs. There's just so many options to choose from. And then sage was to save and to heal. As it states here, the salvia, which means to save and to heal, was given to it because they found that it had medicinal properties since ancient times. And they even believed so much that eating it daily in May would give immortality. I'm not sure why May was so important to the immortality part. And then it was also considered that if sage was happy in a garden, that indicated a well-being of the wife of the household, which I also find interesting because sage is one of the easiest to grow and it's very hardy. Um, I have had two sage plants out in the garden that were not covered, that were under 6 inches of snow, and we went down to 9, and the sage just kept right on trucking. Snow melted off, and it's just as pretty as it was before that. So that might have been what men told themselves to make themselves feel better about things, because I have a feeling there weren't that many happy wives. Who knows? And then thyme was known for purity. Wherever thyme grows wild, it indicates a pure atmosphere. And it was also a place where fairies like to play. Um, some cultures use thyme to help the deceased transition to the spirit world. And a sachet of thyme under the pillow while sleeping was said to dispel nightmares and give positive dreams. And who knows, that aromatherapy might have worked for that. And there's all kinds of different legends that go with the herbs. This is probably one of my favorite parts to look into. Um, and I have garlic on there. I didn't talk about garlic in the workbook itself, but a lot of the medicinal aspects of the herb was how the folklore got started because they might not have understood the science behind the herbs and how they were working, but they noticed that the herbs made an impact. And so back when the plague was um, just killing people by the hundreds, they noticed that the garlic mongers didn't get sick. And so they believed that in that era that illness was caused by evil spirits. So they felt like there was a supernatural power with the garlic that when you wore it around your neck, it warded off those evil spirits. Well, now we know that garlic is antifungal, antimicrobial, antibacterial. It is a powerful weapon in regards to medicinal herbs and keeping the body healthy. So that's why the garlic mongers didn't get sick, is they ate so much of their own product that they had a really boosted immune system. So, but people didn't know that. So you had the superstitions that got going about it instead of it just being the science part. Nobody knew the science. So, where to begin? I don't know. I know y'all are all master gardeners. I don't know, Kathleen. Are you a master gardener, Kathleen?
No, I am not. I have done a lot of gardening though and taken most of the Master Gardener classes.
Okay, cool. So if since you're there, I'm gonna assume that y'all have got the gardening part down. So y'all kind of are aware of this, that when you're thinking about your herbs or any garden, you know, you have to consider where you're putting it, how much light, um, why do you want to grow it? To me, herbs are the best plants to grow just because they smell good, they're pretty, they have a lot of different purposes. You can find ground covers, you can find big bushy varieties, and for the most part, herbs are tough. They're very forgiving. They can take a lot of stresses, and so I like people to start off with those if they're beginner gardeners. And then of course one of the things you have to consider is where's your water located. I don't know about y'all, but I have certainly put my pots or put things in places where I thought that was a mistake because now I'm toting water because it's not convenient. So water, and then I have learned living in Louisiana, I have to pay a lot of attention to drainage, what plants like. Rosemary is not happy on our place in the ground because our water tables are so high and it does not drain quickly. So it's been every place you go is a whole nother kind of experience. So rosemary's in a pot, big pot at my place now. And I miss being able to plant it in the ground and have like a hedge with it. Because to me, it's one of the best hedges out there. You couldn't ask for more. It's heat tolerant, drought tolerant, all of that. But we can't do that here. And then same with lavender; those have to be planted in pots. And then I use a fast draining, like a made for cactus stuff. And um, and then you can usually find an herb for every kind of style of garden you might want to have. People who are very controlled that like things neat and tidy. A lot of shrubs take trimming and shaping really, really well. You can make topiaries out of them. And then if you kind of like that relaxed cottage garden style, the herbs will they'll accommodate you there too. And so the four key things, as y'all know, is the light, the water, the soil, and then the design of the garden. So there's my first one. That's back in 2011. And this was back when I didn't know very much. I didn't know a lot of things. But to be honest, this was one that I wouldn't have really changed much at all. It turned out really, really well. And matter of fact, I had some things going on in this garden that I didn't know was such an advantage. We had a pretty wooded lot, which you can kind of see the shadows there. And this picture, as we're looking at it, we're facing the north. And it was this really dense stand of woods that no one had taken care of. No one had um, harvested. It was just wild. So it made it really, really thick. It blocked the north wind. So I had this natural wind block. And we would just be content as little bugs in a rug here. We'd get in the car and go somewhere and get out of the car and then be shocked to death at how cold or how hard the wind was blowing because we just didn't feel it. So I had that sheltered wind block that I didn't understand the impact it had on my gardens till after I moved. And then my hoop house was up under the trees. And I was always concerned I wasn't getting enough sun, but yet my plants grew well in the hoop house. Grew a lot of herbs in that hoop house. And it was great. And I had clay, which I thought was a bad thing, which has its challenges. But then we moved to the farm on the hill, which if y'all came out to classes, that's where y'all came. And that was a sandy soil piece of property, and it had a lot less trees. So my hoop house was now in full sun. It was hot as blazes, and I had the full impact of the north wind hitting me. So location matters, and you can have a very different location on your property from front yard to the backyard, or how whatever with that. And so I always said that if I ever found myself with the wind block like I had and the big trees for shade, I was going to appreciate it because I was going to really know what I had. It took me years to mend the sand enough to really hold water and hold nutrients. And whereas the clay, it's thick, it's muddy, it's hard to work with, but it's full of nutrients and it will retain water, sometimes too much. But the sand doesn't retain any water whatsoever. So very different. And then so we went from the farm on the hill to Galveston for a couple of years, and I learned to garden in the humidity, severe and incredible humidity there being on the island. And I learned how to do containers because I didn't have a yard. We had a concrete courtyard. And so I got really good at containers at that point. And so now here we are in Southwest Louisiana, and I have a north wind block like that with the woods. I have that shady spot, and then I have a bunch of clay and sand mixed together. So it's kind of like everything I ever did all came together on this one place. We even have a few patches of loam, and whenever I hit that, I just think I've hit the lottery. It's so great. All right, so let's talk about containers. I thought I knew containers before I went to Galveston. This is a picture of one of my containers in Galveston. Um, but I really started to figure out that I didn't know nearly as much as I did, and I had to learn because, like I said, we had a courtyard. It's concrete. We lived in the East End, the historic district in Galveston, and I loved every minute of it. But it was a whole different kind of environment for gardening. And so, y'all have been gardening in your areas, I'm sure, for quite a while, so you kind of understand what you're dealing with. Um, but environment makes a huge difference. And for the most part, herbs do really, really well in containers. Some shrubs like lavender and rosemary, they're going to get big, especially rosemary. So that one needs to be in a large container or it's going to get unhappy real quick. And then the rest of them, they'll be pretty content with whatever container you have. And but I will say you have to keep things that like the same environment together. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. Um, and I also like this too because I love being, like I said, I'm all about being independent. But you don't have to have a huge garden to be independent and to grow the medicinal herbs. The containers work really, really well. And again, the same things apply as would if you're putting it in the ground. The location, the light, where's your water coming from, size of pot versus size of plants at maturity, and then ease of harvest. If they're not convenient to you, you won't harvest them. And then, of course, do not overwater because we want to. It just seems like we should have to give them more water than they need. Okay, so keep the likes together. Um, One of the biggest mistakes I see on, Pinterest or even in pots when I go out to garden centers is frequently they'll have things that lack a lot of water with something that doesn't lack a lot of water. Or you have something that needs more shade paired with something that needs full sun. And you're not going to get good results there. I was in a big box store and there was a camellia there and they had a big sign on it that said, I love sun. And maybe in some areas, the camellia might be okay in the sun, but this was Texas. So in a Texas summer, that camellia will not be happy in the sun. So you do need to know what you're looking at, what you're buying. Um, and then some people will group herbs together. Obviously, they have to be compatible for growing, but sometimes they'll put in a garden that's just for tummy issues or digestive issues, or they'll put in a garden that's just for herbs that are good for skin, and we'll do it that way, or a tea garden, like they'll include herbs together that make teas out of. So, as in any time that you garden, it's just all about what you want, what you like, and what you need. And I'll also say that in approaching it as medicinal herbs, what is it that you need help with? Are you needing herbs that are good for digestive issues? Or are you needing herbs that help boost your immune system because you keep getting sick? And if that's the case, then that's where I think you should start is where you are, what you need. And then that way, as you harvest, you can start to use them and that will help improve your health. And then so on harvesting the herbs. So you've got them growing and they're coming. And this was the part that I thought there was this big mystery. How did there had to be some complicated way to get it out of the garden and into, what you buy in the health food stores, little bitty capsules. So it had to be something magic, or complicated. And it is not actually complicated at all. All you need is a pair of scissors and then you just cut the stems. And like I said here, and I said it in the workbook, Don't just cut the leaves off. Picture the basil plant. Don't just cut the leaves, cut the stem. And then that'll cause it to bush out and make more stems. And then the more you keep cutting, the bigger it gets. And so now you've got a nice, bushy, healthy plant versus one little stalk that you just keep cutting the leaves off of. That's going to stress it out and it's going to not last nearly as long as it could. Basil plants will last the entire season, even after they start blooming. It kind of gets on my nerves a lot. It's not kind of, it seriously gets on my nerves. Some people will say that a basil will die after it blooms, and that's not true. They will go all summer long and they will bloom up a storm, and the bees and the butterflies absolutely love it. So there's all different varieties of basil, and they all bloom. Some bloom more than others. And the lemon basil will bloom a whole lot more than, say, the sweet Genevieve's. And then a holy basil or the blue, I just went blank, the blue basil, um, they'll bloom like crazy. And I actually plant those mostly for the bees and the butterflies to use. So they're fantastic. So cut them, make them, get them bushy. And then when you've cut them, you can bring them right on in and just use them as a tea. You can use them as in a tincture, or you can use them fresh, whether you're using them fresh in your salads or you're making a pot roast or whatever, and you're using the herbs that way, or you can put them fresh into medicinal herb preparations. And we're going to talk more about those in just a minute. Um, don't use fresh herbs in infused oil. And again, we're going to talk about that in a second too, but that's why it's not listed. So use the fresh herbs, as desired. And then the best time of the day to harvest is after the morning dew has dried and before the heat of the day has come on. And the reason why is because the essential oils are in the herb, and that is what gives the herb its power mostly. There are other chemical compounds in the plant itself, but the most of the power of the herb resides in the oil, the essential oils. And that's why when you bump a plant and then you smell that wonderful scent, well, you've released the essential oils. They are considered volatile, not in the sense that they will blow up, but volatile in the sense that they don't stay put. They move around. So if it's gotten too warm in the day, all your essential oils will be being released off the leaves. And if it's still too wet, you won't the plants will mold and things like that before they actually get dry. And if you're in a very humid area where I am, that even gets more essential that you let the plants dry well before you harvest them. So you want to hit that little window. And of course, that time will kind of adjust depending on what time of the year we're in. Some parts of the summer, you may need to be harvesting those herbs at 7:30 in the morning because it's about to hit the heat of the day just real quick, and there's not a heavy dew because we're so dry at this point. Or it could be earlier in the spring or later in the fall and you have a really heavy dew. So it might be 10:30 or 11 before you harvest those herbs. So that's how you determine. There's not one set time. It's just when has the dew dried and before it gets super hot. And then if you're not going to use them fresh, you're going to want to then to dry them. And we're going to talk more about how you can dry those here in just a minute. But then typically, you're either going to use a dehydrator or you're going to hang them in bundles. And then, of course, you're going to store your dried herbs in airtight containers out of the direct light, which means on the back of your stove is not a good place for them, even though they look pretty. Jars of herbs look pretty sitting out like that, but the sunlight, the direct light will really cause them to degrade quickly. So here's a spot when we were on the hill. That's where I was drying my herbs. And I would have these little clotheslines going down the hall even, especially like just before the first freeze would come. So you're going to harvest all the basil, and all of the herbs that will be killed back by the freeze. I would have big bundles going down the hall. And it smelled good. It smelled real good. And so this was one of my favorite little spots. And as it went, those shelves filled up with herbs, with tinctures, and that was the shelving unit that my daughter's friend saw and was thinking that I was I was a witch. So Okay, so herbs have, of course, as we've been talking about, many, many different uses. Um, Culinary, you're really missing out if you're not using herbs in your cooking. The flavor that it brings is amazing, and it's really what takes good cooking to really great cooking is the flavor that the herbs can bring, the spices. And the spices also have medicinal qualities too. That's where spices and herbs actually get lumped together or in the same category as in the medicinal aspects of it. And so 1 tablespoon of fresh herbs equals 1 teaspoon of dried herbs. And if you're gonna usually like a recipe is gonna call for a teaspoon of herbs and they're referring to dried. And but if you're using fresh, you'll use a tablespoon and really you use as much as you want to make it taste like you want it to taste. But if you're using a new herb and you haven't tried that before, using this ratio, 1 tablespoon or 1 teaspoon of dried herbs is a good place to start. And I will also warn you if you haven't ever, let's say you've gotten sage for the first time in the garden and you've only ever used it out of the little jar. Um, start small because that sage is going to be far more powerful in flavor than the stuff you got in the jar. And I knocked me and my family about out with a pot of soup the first time I used sage out of the garden because it was so strong. And I had been used to just using tablespoons of it from the grocery store. And that is because they were too old. They had been on the shelf for too long. And that is just typical. By the time and like McCormick, by the time they get them from the field to the processor, processed, packaged, all the stuff done, then shipped out to you, by the time you're getting them in your store, they are just about at the end of their shelf life as it is. And so if when you open the jar, the container, if you can't smell what it's supposed to smell like if it's the sage, if you open that container and you don't smell any sage, then it doesn't have any qualities left, neither culinary nor medicinal. So you just have to toss it out. And typically, once you harvest them, they're going to be good for 6 months to a year, just depending on how they went. But you're going to know by smell. And of course, flavor is all about what what you want it to be. And then herbal oils. I use herbal oils. Excuse me. I use herbal oils a lot for skin concoctions, lotions, salt scrubs, and stuff. But you can also make culinary oils that will add flavor to your salads, or you can use it as marinades, or even fry up, saute your meat and your vegetables with. And then herbal vinegars are really great to be used in dressings for vinaigrettes and things like that. So there's ways you can use them that way. And then um, they're also really pretty. Herbal vinegars with the herb sprigs in them are lovely while they're steeping. We're going to talk about how to make those here in a minute. And they were super popular back in the 90s. Everybody had jars of oil or vinegar with the stuff in it. You buy them at, at Marshall's and stuff. And I don't think I would have ever consumed any of that. There's no telling where it came from. But but it used to be. Okay. And so the preservation of the herbs is also the preparation of the healing aspect or the medicinal aspect of it and the preparation for it to be used. Um, so to preserve it, you're going to dry it. And so for drying it, you can do it in bundles, which I like to use a rubber band that way as the moisture evaporates out of the herb matter and it starts to shrink, the rubber band will tighten around it. I started off using string and it would get loose and fall out before it was quite dry because it was shrinking as it went. And the string didn't shrink with it. So the rubber bands do. So I love those. You can use a dehydrator. I haven't, I, my typical way to do it is the bundles. As you saw, I had the little clotheslines and I would dry it. And that had to do with the fact that um, I would usually have a lot of herbs to do at one time, and I didn't have, nor did I want, a massive dehydrator. And so I would dry with bundles and then I would process them. Um, but you can use a dehydrator that works really well if you have small amounts. And then also, there are a few herbs that need to be dehydrated. Parsley is one of them, parsley and dill both. If you don't use a dehydrator and get those dehydrated quickly, dried out quickly, they tend to mold really quick. They're just more of a tender type of herb. So if you can dehydrate them, you'll get much better success with drying those. And then solar drying. There are solar dryers that you can make for yourself or you can purchase online. There's instructions online. You'll see YouTube videos and stuff. And then um, at my master gardening class with herbs, she used her car. She would obviously you got to keep them out of the direct sunlight, so she would put the screens up on the front windshield and the back windshield. And in the summer, she would just shut all the car doors and put her herbs in there. And it was very effective solar dryer because it got quite hot inside the car. And then she liked it because it made the car smell good. So there's a lot of different little methods you can use to getting it dry. But the point is that you want to get it dried quick enough so that it doesn't mold. I never had a problem um, before we moved to the Gulf Coast with that, but now I have to pay a lot of attention to how dry the herbs are when I cut them and how quickly I get them spread out to dry once I get them in the house because they will mold down here. But that's typically in most places you're not going to really have a problem with that. They'll dry quickly all on their own. And then I do not strip the leaves if I'm drying the herbs. I don't strip the leaves until till they are dry because especially with like thyme, the leaves are tiny and if you're trying to mess with them when they're still fresh, they stick to your fingers and they get squished and it just doesn't work. But if you dry them, then you can hold one end of that stem and just run your hand down the whole stem and the leaves just come right off. And so what I'll usually do is spread a piece of foil or what have you over the counter and then just strip it right into the foil and then use that to dump it into the blender or the coffee grinder. Either one of those, the blender or the coffee grinder will grind up the herbs to where you can put them into a jar and use them just like you would something out of the store. And then if it's for medicinal purposes and you're wanting to get fancy, you can buy the empty capsules and stuff the ground up herbs into the capsules. But for me, there's a lot of easier ways to take your herbal medicine, so I've never messed with that too much. And but you can do that. And you just process them until you've gotten it small enough or fine enough that is what you wanted. And then you're going to place those herbs in a container of your choice and store them in a cool, dark place. Mason jars work really great. And you can even find amber ones now if you want to. There's pink and blue and green. There's all kinds of colors of them out there. So I like things you can reuse, and you can reuse the mason jars so easily, and they're just so easy to come by. You know, you can get them at any Walmart or Sam's, anything like that. So love those jars, but you can use whatever you want. You can even use plastic Ziploc bags if you're really certain that you've gotten them dry. You can put them in a plastic bag. I just don't like to use more plastic than I have to. And and so then herbal vinegars and infused oils. So I apologize. Some of my fonts are off. It looked fine, or it was fine until I shared my screen, and now it's funny how things work. So my apologies. So the herbal vinegars, you're gonna make an herbal. It's so simple. You're gonna have a container of your choice. Again, I'm gonna go with the mason jar, and you're gonna picture the mason jar divided into three sections. You'll put a third of the herbs, a third, fill the jar a third full with the dried herbs or fresh herbs. With vinegar, you can do either one. And then you're going to fill that jar up with your liquid, with your vinegar. And then you're going to cover it And then pay attention if the vinegar was absorbed and all of the herbal matter isn't covered, add more vinegar to it in about 24 hours until it gets, stays above it. Vinegars, they are done within 24 hours to 2 weeks. It just depends on how strong you want that vinegar, the flavor to be. And and then a note on that is do not use the white distilled vinegar off the shelf because the process they use to make the vinegar is not very it's not good for you. You don't want to ingest that. So a rice wine vinegar, apple cider vinegar, any of those will work very well. And the vinegars they last a long time, just like a tincture would. So a vinegar is a great thing to use, and you can use them for vinaigrettes and different things like that. And then the infused oil is made in the same way. A, whatever container you have, put a third of the herbs in it, fill it up to one third of that jar with the herbs, and then fill it the rest of the way up with your oil. And then oils take a little bit long, or no, excuse me, the oils only take 10 days to steep. And you want to make sure you're using a good oil, such as olive oil or almond oil. I know there's been a lot of controversy now over seed oils and different things like that. So I tend to just stick with olive oil because it's easy to find in a large quantity. You can buy organic olive oil and know you're getting a good product. And everyone seems to agree that olive oil is good. So we're just gonna stick with the olive oil. And we'll use the other ones, we'll use those for later. And so both of those, once they're done steeping, you're going to use a strainer, pour it from one jar to the other over the strainer, and then you'll just toss out the herb matter when you're done. I usually feed mine to the chickens because there's a lot of good stuff left in there, so I feed them to the chickens, or you could even compost them. And and then the oil will last for about 6 months. Again, vinegar is going to last a couple years. It's as long as it's clear, still looks the same, and it hasn't started bubbling weird on its own, then you're good to go. And that's another thing as you're making the herbs, the herb infused oils or the herbal vinegars. Um, you don't have to be afraid of them. In all of the time that I've done this now, I've only had one or two jars ever go bad, which probably means um that there was something in the jar probably that caused it to come alive. And so if it's bubbling, if it's doing things on its own that it ought not do, you just toss that. So like I said, in all of the time I've done, I've had about two jars ever go bad on me. And then that's also why when you're making the oil, you want to use the dried herbs because if the herbs are fresh, they might have some pathogens still on the surface that under normal circumstances, me and you just eating the herbs, there's, pathogens around us all the time. It's not a problem. But given time to ferment in the oil and live and grow, then it can become a problem. So, and that's what went bad for me. Both times were infused oils. I've never had a tincture go bad, never had a vinegar go bad in the process. So I always like to use dried herbs when I'm working with oils. And then with vinegar or tinctures, you can use either one. And then freezing is a good option too if you're going to cook with the herbs. Once you freeze the herbs, kind of like any other kind of vegetable, and you thaw it back out, the texture won't be the same, things like that. So freezing is great. I especially like doing this with, say, cilantro that I'm going to put into, you can even make salsa with the frozen cilantro because you're going to blend it all up together. And what you would do is just run the fresh herbs through the processor and blend them with some oil until you've got a pretty good paste. And then you'll put that paste into the ice trays or some other sort of form. Let that freeze, and then you can take those cubes out and put them in a freezer bag and keep them in the freezer. So that's another easy way to add flavor to your soups or your stews. And that will also helps you, you might not have room for more jars, or maybe you don't need to dry anymore, but then you can freeze them, and that's just another option that you have. You will have a well-stocked pantry if you do all these things. And you get spoiled too. Once you start using the fresh herbs in your cooking, if you eat somewhere that doesn't have it, you're gonna you will miss it. And living down here in Cajun country, um, we've gotten used to a lot of flavor, and they like it hot down here. And we've gotten used to a lot of flavor. And I traveled up to Pennsylvania and Delaware with my husband, and we ate really, it was really good food, but it was almost bland because I got used to Cajun Cajun spices down here. So the herbs will spoil you to good food. Okay, and then tinctures. This is my favorite medicinal compound. Um, with these, um, I don't know how I wanted to put it. I was trying to think. It allows you to have a fully stocked pharmacy, basically, in your kitchen or in your pantry, and you don't have to worry about it going out of date or going bad. Tinctures will last several years because the alcohol is already kind of in an elemental form. It's stable. You don't use wine. Um, you need things like vodka or brandy. And because wine's not finished. Wine will turn to vinegar if you give it time. So wine's not finished. That's why you wouldn't use it in a tincture. Um, but the vodka is, and it will keep for a very long time. So you can do things like one of my newfound favorite um herbs, is goldenrod, and it grows wild on its own. I have never cultivated it, but for this past fall, it was blooming, and I was able to catch it at the right time. And you've got to paying attention. You want it as the buds have just started to be yellow, and they haven't fully all opened yet. That's kind of like that prime time. You're gonna to cut off the blooms and the leaves there that go with it. And it is for allergies and winter illnesses. And we got sick, and I had this one for the first time I had used it. So I strained it. It was ready. I strained it, and I took some. And I was amazed at how it knocked my symptoms down just as good as NyQuil would do. Now with herbs, you have to take them more often. It's not synthetic. Your body either uses it or it flushes it. It doesn't, hang on to it for a long time. And that's a benefit because synthetic stuff actually stays in your system probably sometimes longer than it should, or it's more work for your liver to process out, things like that. So this is actually a good trait. It's just one of those things you have to deal with. And so it would knock the symptoms down, and then talk about an expectorant. It pulled stuff up out of my lungs that I think might have been there a year or two. I mean, I was not prepared, but boy, did I feel better. And so I have been a massive fan now of goldenrod. And so by using the tinctures, because it only blooms in the fall, so you've only got this one window to get it, and then you won't have it again for another year. So a tincture allows you to keep this stuff on the shelf for a long time. So I love the tinctures. Um, and so I'm realizing two different workbooks, I think, were in play here. Um, so tell me, ladies, have I been following along with your workbook, or have I skipped over a lot of stuff that's in the workbook you have?
I'm
Like,
following you.
Yeah, I think you've been following it.
okay, did y'all have a section where we talked about the triad of bodily functions?
Uh,
The part right there?
No.
That would
Uh-uh.
have been at the front.
I don't remember that.
Okay.
No, and I don't see it.
Okay, that's fine. There was a different, I had adjusted a workbook for another project and I had it in here and I looked at that and thought, oh dear, I've just skipped over. They probably think I'm going all over the place. And I kind of am.
Holly,
Yes.
Holly, this is Gail, and I'm going to sign off. I'm going to go finish supper so I can go to bed because we have class tomorrow. We have Master Gardener class
Okay.
tomorrow.
Well,
And
I'll send you the recording.
oh, would you? Thank
Yeah.
you so much. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. All y'all will get the recording so y'all can rewatch it and or anything if you ever needed it.
Okay. Well, thank you a lot.
You're
And
welcome. It's
I
good
have
to see
enjoyed
you.
it. I can hardly wait for you to come back this
Oh, I'm
fall.
excited. Can't wait to be
Uh,
there. Won't be
okay.
long.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Gail. Hi, baby. Okay, so back to the tinctures. These are super easy to make as well. Just like this is what I also love about medicinal herbs. Once you learn the process is the same, regardless if you're making an oil or a vinegar or a tincture. Like once you learn the process of it, you can make whatever you want. So same thing, picture the jar, put a third of the jar in, full of the herbs and then fill it up with the alcohol. And then you're going to cap it, and this is going to take 6 weeks, and you're going to want to shake it every couple of days or so. And then if you go longer than 6 weeks, it's not a problem. Some of mine sit for quite a bit longer than 6 weeks before I get time to strain them. And then you're going to strain the liquid through. It can be a strainer, it can be a coffee filter, it can be muslin, strainers most people have in their house. So just use that and then store the liquid in an airtight jar. The dosage is a quarter teaspoon. And so you don't need very much. Once you get your herbs made up, I like to go ahead and now that we have Amazon or in the internet, I'm really dating myself, but back when I first began, you didn't have the resources we do now. But you can order the little jars with the droppers. And so then you can transfer some of that into the jar with a dropper, and that will make the dosing even easier. But a quarter teaspoon is what is usually a typical dose. And so that's why I was comfortable giving it to my kiddos because um, there was, yes, it's alcohol, but there's really a very small amount of alcohol. If you read the label on, say, your cough syrup or whatever, there's a lot more alcohol in that than what is in a dose of a tincture. And so I would put them in my kids' sippy cups and they would just drink them down. And it really did help. I could always tell a big difference, but because we went to church and we were in the nursery. You know how in the nursery one kid will get sick and then it'll kind of go through the whole group. And my kids did not get sick very often at all. We avoided a lot of it, and I know it had to do with the fact that as soon as somebody started having a snotty nose, tinctures went in everybody's cups. And so then like I was saying, you can store those airtight jars for up to a year or two. Actually, the original lady who taught me about it said that the tinctures were good until Jesus came back. Like they just didn't go bad. Once the herb matter was suspended in the alcohol, it was stable and you could use it for years. And now hopefully you don't have it for years because you want to be using this. Instead of going and pulling out the aspirin, you want to get the tincture out. There's quite a few different herbs that are an analgesic, which is what Tylenol or Advil is. And one of those is lemon balm, which is super common and super easy to grow. And then another one is wild daga. It's also called lion's ear or lion's tail. And it's a really powerful herb for easing pain. And I learned about it from a friend of mine. And it grows easy, super easy around here too, and you harvest the blossoms. And she likened it to tramadol. I've never taken tramadol, but she had a prescription for it, and she said that a teaspoon of the wild daga tincture did the same for her as what one pill of the tramadol did. So,
Wow.
yeah, it was great. And then once she introduced me to that, that was another game changer. And that's another kind of what I was talking about. Like you're just learning as you go. Um, there's uh, there's so many different herbs you can do, so many different things. And so then I combined the and everyone's body is different. So you might react differently to an herb than somebody else would. And so for me, the wild dago worked really well, but then also so does valerian root, and that's a muscle relaxer. And so I made a tincture with equal parts lion's tail or the wild daga and the valerian root. And if I carry my stress in my neck, I think a lot of us do, right there in your neck, right there at the back. And so if I've had a lot going on or I've worked a little too hard in the gardens, and things I'm tense, I'm tight, that the combination of the valerian and the wild daga is perfect. It relaxes me, takes out the pain, but yet there's no side effects to it and it's not damaging your liver. So that's just fantastic. So I'm all about the herbs. So I put together a couple of tinctures or combos that you can use. Thyme, echinacea, and dandelion is a really powerful immune booster. I've always said, and it comes down to kind of two for me, garlic and dandelion. If I'm picking, like if I could only pick one that I could use for immune boosting, I still say it would be dandelion because of the way that dandelion also clears the lymphatic system and cleanses your liver. And so if your body isn't able to process, if all your systems aren't functioning, then you're not going to get well. And so you want to not only boost your immune system, but you also need to make sure that your liver is able to do its job and clean your blood and clean this stuff out. So I love dandelion because it boosts the immune system, but then it also stimulates the kidneys um and the liver to do their jobs. You'll be shocked by this. It's a bitter. It doesn't taste good. So when you're making your tinctures, get the biggest bottle of the cheapest liquor that you can get. It's not supposed to taste good because by the time you put the herbs in it, you've just ruined it. As far as drinking goes, you've ruined it. So just go with the least expensive. Um, I bought a big old bottle at Sam's for $12 of vodka, which was, a great price. And I hadn't drank any of it. I was just making tinctures and I overfilled it. Um, where I wasn't comfortable, putting the lid on. I'm like, well, I'll just swig a little off of it. Gosh, that was like turpentine. It was bad. But I was like, it doesn't matter because it's got dandelions in it. It's gonna taste bad anyway when we're done. So get the least expensive that you can, and then in the biggest volume because you'll use more than once you get going, you'll use more than you think you do. And again, tinctures you can use it fresh or dried. So I love dandelion, and dandelion's one that as long as you don't spray your yard with herbicides, you can find dandelions out in your yard. And that long taproot that ensures they always come back. That root is really you'll use the whole plant. I use all of it. So whenever I harvest dandelion, I do scrub the root clean. I don't usually wash the herbs because I don't want to wash the essential oils off. And generally they don't need it. Generally it's going to be they'll just be clean. But if you're pulling up the roots, you will have to wash the roots off. And I always chop the roots up while they're fresh because it's easier. Once you let them dry, you can still do it, but it's like leather, so it's a lot more difficult. So I will chop roots up and let those dry um, versus the bundle. And so dandelion is great. And then I have for anxious mind and to relax the tight muscles there, I have three other ones listed: St. John's wort, chamomile, and catnip. And all of these work well too. You just there's so many to choose from. So I liked whatever's growing well at the time. That's what I'm using. So chamomile and St. John's wort, those tend to be really plentiful in the early part when it's still a little bit cool. So spring and early summer. As it starts to get hotter, you might not find St. John's wort and chamomile, but you'll be able to find the wild dahlia because it loves the heat. Matter of fact, I don't usually get to harvest that until about September when we've had a long hot summer and it'll just produce like mad. And once you get the wild dahlia going, once you've gotten it established, it will reseed itself and come back every year. Chamomile will do the same, and then catnip is actually a perennial. It'll stay going all year round. The St. John's wort is supposed to be a perennial. I have found it a little bit tricky and usually only get about 2 years out of it. And then I have to replant it. So, uh, you know how plants are. You just can't ever really explain it. And then thyme is a perennial. It grows super well in all the regions. And then echinacea is also a perennial. Echinacea is one that you're going to use the roots on. And so you don't want to probably don't want to harvest it the first year. You wait to the second year so you can harvest and then put some back so it'll keep growing. With dandelions, they come up from seed, so there's no need to try to, have to worry about first year, second year, or anything else like that. Um, Calendula is a pretty little orange. They call it a pot marigold. To me, it doesn't look anything like a marigold. But that's great for the skin. It will actually it's a cool season plant. It'll take a light freeze. Like I covered the area of the garden when we had a big freeze that we just had, and those plants, they came through it just fine. So they don't like the heat of the summer, but for what our winters usually are, they'll usually go all winter if you give them a little bit of protection. Lavender, again, if we have a hard freeze, it'll die back, but it'll come back out from the root. And lavender, you typically will harvest the blossoms from versus just the greenery. And then sage. Sage is just an oldie but a goodie. It's tough. I have found that sage likes a little afternoon shade. I know they say it's full sun, but our summers are so intense that a little afternoon shade is helpful for the sage. And so those are ones that I like to put together. And then these are other just common herbs. Again, I like to focus on the ones that are easy to grow and easy to locate. Parsley is one it's a biennial, so it's gonna be green for all through one year, and then in that second year it's gonna go to seed, and then it'll drop all its little seeds, and then you get a wonderful cycle going again. I love plants that reseed themselves, and I don't have to work very hard at it. So parsley, believe it or not, is way more than just a garnish on a plate. It's packed full of vitamins, and it's also a natural diuretic high in minerals, and then so it helps lower blood pressure and heart rate, improve your vision and your bone health. Who knew, right? Who knew the little plant was so powerful? And then lemon balm, one of my favorites because it smells wonderful. It's lovely to grow. It can sometimes, if it's really happy, it might be a little bit aggressive and kind of spread too much. And but overall, it's pretty easy to work with in the garden. It's a calming herb. It's considered a nervine, and it'll help calm your stomach. It'll help the anxiety levels go down. A lot of people like to use it for babies because it's good for the stomach and helps calm an upset baby down. And it's also very gentle. And it's antiviral, and it's also good for pain relief as well. So I love using lemon balm. It makes a really, really good tea because it tastes good. And if I'm making a tea out of something that maybe doesn't taste so great, like let's say I was going to make a dandelion tea, which I don't care to do that, but let's just say I was. You could mix lemon balm with it or even mint, and that would help it taste better. So lemon balm is a great option. And then we have sage again, antimicrobial, antiviral, helps heal sores on the skins and ulcers. Um, stimulates the brain, stimulates the immune system. It's just an excellent herb. And then rosemary, they are really, there's a lot of studies that have come out over the last few years showing how important rosemary really is. Stimulates circulation, eases headaches. It helps pull off inflammation and buildup of chemicals in the joints, which aggravates the arthritis. And then there also have had studies showing that not only does it work with almost Alzheimer's, like we talked about, but also with cancer. That if you're taking rosemary water or rosemary tincture at the same time that you're taking chemotherapy, it helps the chemotherapy be more specific to the cancer cells. And so that's really pretty incredible. So rosemary is one that it's an all-star and it always has a place in my garden. Love the rosemary. And then basil, again, we think of basil as culinary. You know, we associate it with spaghetti sauce and wonderful Italian food, which absolutely, it tastes great. Um, but it also has a lot of beneficial essential oils. They're listed out there. They're anti-inflammatory and antibacterial. So, anti-inflammatory is really important. We have a lot of inflammation in our bodies, usually because of our diets being poor, and then we are exposed to a lot of toxins just in the air, in the water, and things like that. So, inflammation is a problem that has to be dealt with. And so basil is a good one. Basil actually makes a pretty good tasting tea. Like it, when I heard that, I thought, no, because I associate it with, garlic bread and wonderful good food and all that. And but it makes a really good tea. And then there are a lot of different varieties of basil, such as holy basil, that's even more powerful as far as a immune stimulating herb. And then holy basil has more of a sweet, kind of clovey kind of taste too. So it also makes a really good tea. Holy basil is a big favorite around here. Um, and then peppermint, it's stimulating. Whereas like lemon balm wants to calm you down, peppermint will stimulate. So it stimulates the circulatory system. It but that also equates into relaxing the nervous system. It can aid in digestion because it'll stimulate the gut and stimulate the enzymes. It can ease headaches and is good for a chest rub, which to make a chest rub, you could take the infused oil and blend that with beeswax till you have a lotion, and you can use that. And you could also use eucalyptus essential oil in that as well to help open up the the congestion. Okay. And then there's lots of other uses for herbs. You've got herbal sachets, which you can put in your sock drawer, your underwear drawer, or hang in your closet to make things be fresh. Obviously, flower bouquets. Every herb blooms. Um, Most people don't get to see that because a lot of people just don't grow enough herbs, but every herb blooms at some point during the season, and the bees and the butterflies love it. So, herbs are just really good for so many various reasons. But then also in flower bouquets, herbs are good for being the greenery parts, the full parts. Eucalyptus is an example of a really good one for flower bouquets. And then herbal body scrubs, that's where you can make a salt scrub or a sugar scrub. And again, the herb infused oil, you blend that with um, various salts and essential oils. There's recipes online. You just pick one out. And so it makes a really good body scrub and it's healthy for your skin. Matter of fact, herb infused oils and my salt scrubs are all the skincare I've ever had. And even with living on the coast in Galveston for 3 years, I'm out in the sun whenever I get the chance because I like it. Um, I have very few skin issues. I have one little, I don't know what side it's on right now, but one little spot right now, that a sunspot that will probably bother my family way more than it bothers me. And we'll get it taken care of soon, but still 52. and don't have too many skin issues. And then you can make body butter, same way. Use the oil, blend it with beeswax. Now they're talking about beef tallow. You know, that's the thing. And so you could blend that herb infused oil with beef tallow and get another great body butter going with that. Face wash, herbal baths. An herbal bath is nothing more than a tea. Um, it's just a tea that you make in your bathtub versus on the stove top. So run a really hot bath, put the herbs in there and let them soak, steep until it's cool enough to get in. And then get in, and then your body will absorb all of that. You know, for better or for worse, our skin absorbs whatever is put on it. And some of the research I read said as little as 30 seconds. Some of it said it was more like 15 minutes. But the point was, no matter what, it did absorb whatever was put on it. So it's important that we are mindful of that. So a big total bath soak is a great way to relax, and it'll also be good for your skin, pull out toxins, your body absorbs it, it's all good. And then potpourri, another way to make it smell good in your house. Herbs have so many uses. There's just no reason not to grow them. And even if you didn't do a thing with them, other than have them in your garden, they're still extremely useful. The heavy scents from the essential oils make them a natural insect repellent. So there's always herbs mixed in with my perennials. There's herbs mixed in with my vegetables. And there's a method to my madness. When you look at the garden and things are kind of all mixed up, there's a reason why they're mixed up. So herbs are super, super useful in so many different ways. And pretty sure that's my last slide. Yeah. So now y'all ask me their questions. What do y'all want to know about herbs?
So if you're going to make a tincture out of dandelion, what part of the dandelion do you use?
The whole thing.
The whole thing?
The roots, the leaves, blossoms. I'll use the blossoms too. Blossoms, though, they're kind of funny. If you don't immediately use the blossom, the yellow part, okay, the yellow flower of it, not when it's gone white.
Right.
But if you don't use them real quick, they'll go white on your kitchen counter. You'll have
Really?
dandelion seeds floating around your room. So yeah, they'll do it real quick. But yeah, the whole thing.
Huh. Okay. So is there a good place to order herbs online?
Um, yes, I always recommend like mom and pop shops. There are you wanting to order plants or seeds or both?
Both, I think.
Okay. I really like Southern Seed Exposure.
Yeah.
And then Mary's Heirloom Seeds. Hers have been very good for me. Um, and then as far as plants go, the ones that I have personal experience with, there's a place up in New Jersey called Well Sweep Herb Farm. And when I was up there with Tony, we I bought quite a bit. Imagine that. And I was thinking I was going to have to get it on the plane and get it home, so I had to limit what I was getting. And the guy goes, "Oh no, we ship," and I was like, "Cool." So they shipped them to me, and everything was perfect. It was great. So Well Sweep Herb Farm, and they had a lot of unusual plants too. That herb farm was started back in the 60s, and it's still ran by the same family. Matter of fact, the
Wow.
gentleman that I dealt with was the grandson of the original founder, and so that they were really sweet people. And they have a lot of synodreniums too, if you're into that. And synodreniums
Huh.
are fine. And so they shipped, and they did a really great job. And then Louisiana Herbs LLC. They're they're not too far from y'all. They're up in they're east of Shreveport. I couldn't tell you exactly where, but you can find them on Facebook, and they have a website too. But Louisiana Herbs LLC.
Okay.
And they have a very, very wide variety of herbs, a lot of very cool medicinal herbs. And matter of fact, they have the camellia that you make tea from. And that's on my list of ones to add this year. So I plan on hitting there. I told Tony that's what I wanted for Valentine's Day was to go herb shopping. And so those are my two that I have used and can kind of vouch. I can vouch for their quality and you know doing it well.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
definitely always, if you have the choice, mom and pop versus big box, always go with the mom and pop.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. For one thing, most of your big box stores are Bonnie plants, and those are pretty much destined to die. They've been so in such a controlled environment before they just pop them right out and put them on the shelves, at the big
right.
box stores. So you set yourself up kind of for disappointment if you've got those. But and then I'm trying to think if there's anybody that I used to know. I can't think of anybody. Well, that's how I got into herbs, up in the area where you were. I bought some herbs from a grower. We were selling plants at First Monday and all around, but like landscaping plants, shrubbery, roses, that kind of stuff. And one of the growers had herbs, and I wanted some herbs for my own personal garden, so I bought a few flats and sold off. I kept what I wanted and sold off the extras. And there was so much interest in the herb plants that I realized we should carry more because people wanted them. And then you started to realize how there was a empty spot. There wasn't anybody really carrying herbs, and if you did find them, it was usually just your basic rosemary, mint
Right.
and a few of those others. And so that's why we started carrying them, and that's we did really well selling the herbs. And so I can't think of anybody else around us up there that had it. Down here, if you're ever down in Southeast Texas and Orange, Texas, there is a Cottage Cuttings. They have a really great selection of herbs and some unusual plants too. So,
Hmm.
if you're ever if you're ever in Beaumont, you're not far. You're about 15 minutes from them. So I don't know if you ever get down this way.
Not much. No.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Okay.
then we're hoping
Holly,
in,
this is
in
Kathleen.
2026, we'll have some herbs again for sale. Right now, we just don't have the place to grow them or anything like that. So, but we're in the middle of building. So hopefully by 2026, we'll be open for business in that way.
Cool.
And Holly, this is Kathleen. Thank you so much for doing this. I need to hop off as well.
Okay.
I'm Eastern time, so
I was late
heading
for
off
you
to
then.
bed. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Uh, I have one more question.
Sure. Well, we've got time.
We have a very good friend who has migraines every day. Is there any kind of herb that you can think of that might help him? He's gone to neurologists, he's tried everything. He's currently doing acupuncture, which is
Uh-huh.
helping, but and he does take some herbs from the acupuncture doctor. He's an actual Chinese doctor, but I don't know what they are because it's all in Chinese.
Right. Yeah.
But I
Uh,
didn't know, maybe you might have an idea of just anything that might help.
I'm trying to think. Do they have any idea what causes the
No,
migraine?
that's the problem. He's had multiple head injuries in his life. So it could be from
Oh,
some of those, but he's had MRIs, he's had scans, he's had everything and nothing, there's nothing that shows up.
huh.
So, we're kind of at a loss, but we've been trying to help him, but
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah, I'm just thinking what's funny is many people that have migraine issues, you think someone would have asked me about that before, and I actually don't think I've ever researched it. I'm grateful that I don't have migraines.
Oh, me too.
Or if I do have a bad headache, it's usually tied to not getting enough sleep, honestly, or drinking enough
Right.
water. Um, let me, I guess if I were to just talk off my head right now, any of the ones that helped with, I'm thinking about like rosemary. Any of the ones that really help with the chemical compounds in the brain, and
Hmm.
rosemary is probably the one I can think of the most right now. Um, I would think rosemary might could help. It might help bring balance if he's had some head injuries. Um, it might be that there's some things that need to heal in there,
Right.
which I mean I know they probably already looked at that too, but
Well, and that's the thing. His neurologist said there's no way to tell what kind of chemical imbalance he might have without doing a spinal tap. And it's like, no, that's
yeah,
that's like
yeah.
a really a very last resort, I think. But
Right. Um, yeah, I'll make a note and I will look into it. Um,
so if you use a tincture, then like how often do you take it?
kind of okay, if you're in the middle of like being sick, you need to
Uh-huh.
take it 3 to 5 times a day.
Okay.
Um, if it's kind of like preventative, people around you are sick and you're hoping not to get sick, so you're just
Right.
taking some tinctures, then that's just once a day.
Okay.
Um, and then kind of just, as you feel like you might need it.
Right.
And then with garlic, a little trick we've learned is that especially if someone has a stomach bug, swallow, get you a small clove of garlic and peel the white husk off, but swallow it whole. And it takes so long to dissolve in your gut, it like gives you this long lasting protection. And I
Really?
have since we started doing that, I have not had a stomach bug since. And even though like grandkids, like we have one granddaughter that lives with us and her mom, of course, but little kids get those bugs
Oh
and
yeah.
and we don't
Yeah.
we don't get sick from it because we take that garlic and swallow it down. And if my gut feels weird, like if I think there's something going on, I swallow the garlic because it can't
Huh.
hurt. And so I learned that from a gal. She was much older than me, but she said back her senior year, they went to Mexico, and the little lady where they crossed the border at, they had gone in a shop, and the little lady told them to swallow the garlic. That way they wouldn't get sick from the water. And so she did, and her friend said, "That's stupid. I'm not doing that." Her friend got so sick, and she never got sick. So
Wow.
she said it made her a believer then, and she's used it for her whole life. And I thought, well, that's easy enough because what do you have to lose? I mean, nothing.
Right.
So swallow it. So, yeah, I like if people around me are all getting sick, I'll swallow the garlic clove whole. And Tony and I, my husband, we're in our 50s, and I don't take any prescription medication. And he was diagnosed with diabetes a couple of years ago, and his doctor automatically put him on two pills, or same pill
Mhm.
but twice a day, and insulin shots. And Tony was just like, absolutely not. And so we started using herbs, and then he got real serious about working out as well, and
Right.
brought his diabetes, under control fast. And he's doesn't have problems with it. Like it's still there, and we're hoping to move to where we don't have it at all. He doesn't have it at all, but it's still very manageable. And I found an herbal concoction for him. Um, uh, Chambers bitter. So it's an awful little weed that grows in your yard. It almost looks like a mimosa tree, but it never gets tall. It's just short,
Yeah.
real low. It's actually a really powerful herb for lowering blood pressure and stimulating the pancreas and cleaning out your bladder and all of that. So I made a tincture with that and ginger and turmeric to bring down inflammation and several of those help with absorbing the sugar. And he can tell there's about a 5 to 10 point difference in his blood sugar in the morning when he takes that tincture when he doesn't. So
Wow.
there's a lot of options that can help us keep, the synthetic medications that are out there to a minimum. And yeah, so that's my goal. So my kids were raised on it. Now my grandkids are raised on it. And one thing about it is, they're sick when they come and ask you for the tincture that tastes awful. Like,
Right.
okay, they're serious about it. And then
Yeah.
if they're trying to get out of staying home and you're like, well, you got to take this, they're like, no, never mind. I'm going to school. So yeah, it changed it. There's no dyes in it, you know, all of that.
Right.
So it's just a healthier way to be.
Interesting.
And they
Okay.
make us happy. Gardening is good for us.
Yep. Yep, for sure. Huh. All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you. And we'll talk soon, and keep an eye out in your emails because the recording will be coming along. It'll probably take me, I have to travel for work for the next 2 days. So it'll probably be Thursday or Friday, but it'll be there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.